Hello and welcome to yet another review of one of my old classic SFF books that I recently acquired. So this one, as you'll have seen from the thumbnail, is The Planet Savers by Marion Zimmer Bradley, and the cover tells us that it's a novel in the classic Darkover series. Now, this is a fairly thin book, and it is first UK publication. And it's an Arrow. I've got quite a few Arrows. I do wonder a little about whether this Arrow's yellow, I mean it was probably yellow when it was published, it's more like beige now. Cover was trying to mimic the popularity of the Doors, whose yellow covers were very popular. I'm not crazy about this cover. It's quite beautiful in its own way. It's got those little Art Deco frills and it's got a really pretty font for its title, and it's got a weird picture that is well enough painted and is mildly related to the story, or at least the first story, but I'm not convinced. So this one was published in '79. I feel there's a 70s vibe to it, I'm gonna say. And it incorporates two stories. The first one is The Planet Savers, after which it's named. And that was, according to this, written in 1962, or first published in 1962. The internet tells me it may have been published as early as '58, though. And the second story is The Waterfall, which doesn't bear a lot of relationship to the first story and was first copyrighted in 1976. So, I'm going to start with a word about Marion Zimmer Bradley. I feel I could probably dedicate a whole 20-minute video just to the author, Marion Zimmer Bradley, and if you'd like to see it and enough people or the right people ask me, I might even do that. Marion Zimmer Bradley was a very popular American author. She was everywhere for a while. When I was young, her books were in every second-hand shop, and I read quite a lot of them. She is most known, as I understand it, for her Darkover series, and for her Mists of Avalon. I didn't get into the Mists of Avalon. I read most of the first one. I deeply disliked it. I didn't finish it and I never progressed. Please don't anyone start sending me hate mail. If you want to know why I didn't like it, it scarred me enough as a teenager that I remember even now why. And a lot of the problems that I had with it are with all of Zimmer Bradley's writing, of which I read a lot because there was a lot of it out there. Now, the Darkover series was really everywhere, and there were a lot of books. The Planet Savers is generally considered to be the first written. And my understanding is that it was first published in one of those cool blue and white, you flip them over, there's the other book type kinds. I've forgotten what they're called, but a lot of people collect them. Someone can probably comment below. And my understanding of this one, and the internet agrees with me, is it was originally published as a companion to another one that was a more popular, more mainstream, I guess, one. What was it called? It was founded here, yes. Okay, so apparently when they do this and then this, it's a dos a dos? I don't know, it's French, I don't speak French. And the original was published with The Sword of Aldone, which I have read. Okay, so there we go. And this story, The Planet Savers, originally appeared in the November 1958 issue of the magazine Amazing Stories, according to Wikipedia, which very rarely leads me astray. Enough on that. Marion Zimmer Bradley, I won't keep going on that one. With this particular story, I enjoyed the first one a lot more than I did the second one. So the first one is one that has dated quite a bit in a few specific ways, but I don't find them offensive and I enjoyed them. So you start off in this room, a guy's coming out of what we find out later is hypnosis. He's waking up to himself, looking around, and there's a doctor in the room, what's he called? Dr. Forth, who's talking him out of it. And he's asking if I had amnesia, have I had an accident. Dr. Forth is being very, very cherished with his information. And eventually we find out that this particular person, who we end up calling Jason, is a case of multiple personalities. Now, those were big things in the 60s, I'm going to say. There was a book called Sybil about a woman who had many multiple personalities. There was the Four Faces of Eve, which I believe is referenced in passing in here. People who are into psychology today may not like this book based on that, because this very much assumes that Jason has a split personality, at least two, throughout the book. And since I believe split personalities are currently debunked, you may not love that if you're heavily into accuracy. And I totally understand you if you are. There's some things that I really can't deal with in terms of inaccuracies in the science of science fiction. Usually I can coast with them. With multiple personalities, I can definitely coast. Okay, come on, screaming bird, whatever. There we go. Say hello to your audience. No, says Reapy Cheap. I will not. Okay, so Jason has been brought out of, he's like the subconscious or suppressed consciousness of Dr. J. Allison. And he's been brought out of the subconscious and into the primary conscious because Darkover has this dreadful need. They've been approached by one of the Hastors. The Hastors are like the premier family of the old Darkover. And they've approached the Earthside Darkover post, asking for assistance with a disease that reoccurs every 48 years and which wipes out huge numbers of the population. They call it the Trailman's disease because they believe it comes from this Aboriginal race, this native race to Darkover. They're very much not human, and they don't have a lot of contact with humans. They're described as arboreal. They build cities in the trees. But because this was written in the 50s or published in the 60s or as late as the 70s, what have you, we have a lack of modern responsibility, I suppose you'd say, towards meeting other intelligent species and protecting their rights. These guys live up in these hills called the Hellas, which are apparently hell to climb. Very, very high, so you've got altitude sickness in there and everything. And because of their lack of contact with humans, the Earth people have assumed that the only way to get an antidote for this 48-year Trailman plague is to go and get the antibodies from a number of people of the Trailman. In order to do that, they need someone who knows the Trailman. And Dr. J. Allison, who we know primarily as Jason, lived with them as a child for 8 years when his father's flying device was wrecked in the Hellas and he was taken in by the Trailman. The Trailman had eventually decided that he was too alien for their colony, and they very compassionately returned him to the humans so that he could have a proper Earthman human life. At that point, J. Allison went through some sort of metamorphosis or crisis of conscience, turned on everything that had happened before with hate and distanced himself from it. In fact, Dr. J. Allison has distanced himself so completely from his early life that he doesn't remember the language of the Trailmen. He remembers them unfondly, and he doesn't have a lot of human attributes. Jason has been brought out, and Jason has retained his love of the Trailmen. He has retained the language, and he's retained a lot of human attributes, including, we are told, recklessness and attributes that J. Allison considered to be his bad characteristics, and so he suppressed them. Jason is our primary protagonist throughout the story of the Planet Savers, and he's actually quite likable. He is a little bit erratic, but he doesn't seem to me to be particularly problematic, or he doesn't have those very childish or childlike attributes, and I wouldn't have said that he was unnecessarily reckless in any way. Okay, so Jason identifies as being 10 years younger than Dr. J. Allison actually is. And apparently when his character is brought out, his physical appearance changes so dramatically that people who actually know Dr. Allison fail to recognize him. They have a sense of familiarity, but they don't really know who he is. So there's all that, and there's a lot to it in a very small book. I did find that very enjoyable. Okay, so Jason's been recruited to the cause. He goes marching off into the wilderness, knowing that when he comes back, whether he gets agreement for the trailman or not, he is probably going to be rehypnotized, and he's basically going to die as Dr. J. Allison comes out again. So this expedition has been put together by Dr. what's his name? Norris? Forth. By Dr. Forth, who says that if he couldn't have persuaded anyone else, he would have had to go himself, even though he had zero Buckley's chance of success. In his team is in the team that Jason is traveling. There's Rafe Scott, who appears in another Darkover book and who I very vaguely remember, and Regis Hastor, who is one of the leading families of Darkover, the Hastors. There's also a woman, Kyla Rainich, who's part of Free Amazons or something like that. And, oh dear. My computer did a thing, sorry. And she's really the only female in this whole story, unless you include a tribe of rogue females of the Trailmen who actually attack them on the way. They have a lot of adventures on the way. They're travelling over Darkover in various ways. There's a certain amount of give and take in the group. The Hastor family is as preeminent as they are because they all have psi capacities. And Regis Hastor apparently is a telepath, as well as maybe some other things. There's some green glowy things that appear during the attack. I don't know what those are meant to be. Anyway, I really enjoyed this story. They make it to the Trailmen, and I'm not going to really spoil it. Actually, wait, has Wikipedia already spoiled it? To some extent. They make it to the old people, the Trailmen. Jay draws on his experience living with them in order to get them an audience with the Great Old One, and he manages to convince them to send people down. A serum is developed. By now, of course, Jason has been subsumed. He kind of agreed to that because his alter ego, Dr. J. Allison, is needed to produce the serum, and they do that. At the end, we end up with a character that is neither Jason nor Jay, and the way that's done is really interesting. I enjoyed it. I think a psychologist who isn't open-minded may not, but I enjoyed it. Okay, enough of that. Now, Kyla, our Free Amazon guide. Now, as I was reading her character, I remembered some vague things that Marion Zimmer Bradley had this notion of Free Amazons, because Darkover is essentially an incredibly patriarchal planet in which women have all the autonomy of women, I guess, in the 1300s in England. Again, not going into the Marion Zimmer Bradley in this video. Could do in another one. Maybe I will if I'm in the mood. Kyla and Jason fall in love. I don't enjoy Marion Zimmer Bradley's treatment of women, which is odd since she's a woman and since many people, though not herself, apparently claimed she was a feminist, and that's probably why I disliked the Avalon series as much as I did. Kyla as a character and Kyla and Jason as a couple were problematic, but they are a minor part of the story, which I thoroughly recommend. I really enjoyed The Planet Savers. Like many of Zimmer Bradley's books, I'm starting to realise I enjoy her best when she doesn't have many women characters in them. And that became exceptionally obvious when I reached the second story, which was The Waterfall. And where is it? It's a tiny, yes. It goes from page 103 to page 116 at the back of the book. Written, like I said, about 10 years after The Planet Savers. It's about one woman, and it is god-awful. It is absolutely shockingly bad. It is a wince a paragraph and a whimper a page story that I loathed. We have a central protagonist. She's female. She's in the Darko. She's the sister of one of the Darko princes. She doesn't like where she's at. So basically, she has sex with a guy and then claims he essayed her to get him killed. And that is her psi power, apparently. Yeah, right. I know that there's some really angry people out there who like having that sort of story which addresses the sources of their dislike, but I didn't enjoy that at all. And I didn't think that the writing was really anywhere near as nice as The Planet Savers. This Planet Savers is an early book, and it's got some writing quirks to it, to be sure, but The Waterfall is fragmented. It lacks the beautiful descriptive power that Zimmer Bradley occasionally employs in The Planet Savers. It lacks characterization. It seems to feed on negative emotions. She's standing, when it opens, at a precipice over a waterfall. We get nothing of the surrounds. We only get her anger. Rage at a patriarchal environment I can get, but I don't like the way The Waterfall did it. Anyhow, so this is both a great and a wobbly start to my slight inclination towards getting more Marion Zimmer Bradleys. I would like to read more of the Darkovers. I know I liked them back in the day. I also know that they confused me and occasionally I didn't like them as much. I've always attributed that to the fact that I hadn't read them in order. I read them as I picked them up. Now, this morning I read something that Marion Zimmer Bradley wrote. She didn't like writing series, though apparently she did for Avalon. And she doesn't see her Darkover books as a series. She thinks each one of them should be one you can pick up and read on its own. I don't know. Maybe as an adult reader I'm going to, or a more mature reader, perhaps I'm more mature, I keep trying, I will be able to enjoy the Darkover books differently or more than I did when I was a teenager reading them. I would like to read them more or less in order, but it's very hard to find an order. You've got an order of publication, but that's nowhere near an order of things happening on Darkover. It seems like she pretty much made the world, enjoyed it, and romped around and had some fun in it. So yes, The Planet Savers. At least arguably the first Darkover, or one of the first Darkovers. Do thoroughly recommend it. If you can, I would say get that Do-si-do one. Dos-a-dos, whatever, which has it combined with the Altone book. Sword of Altone? Aldar. Whatever. The other book I mentioned earlier in the show. I think that would be a much better pairing than The Waterfall. I'm not sure what a good pairing for The Waterfall would be. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do algorithm things. By all means, read good books. Today is a rainy, stormy day. It's an ideal day for reading good books. I'm going on to go on to another John Brunner science fiction, which I shall review in time. Another fascinating author that I would actually like to talk about on his own. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.